Men, happy Sunday to you all. Now, a lot of you may know that the election is coming up next Saturday. And it's a pretty critical juncture for Australia at this point, particularly what the major parties have been up to. And one of the parties that I've been regularly advocating for, because I've actually really feel strongly about their policies, and I've seen consistent, pro-egalitarian, merit-based, I guess, speeches and postings and policies put forward regarding them. Now, I'd like to dedicate this video to a gentleman who came up to me last night and introduced himself while I was working security at a particular venue. Thanks for coming up and saying hi, Peter. This is Mark Latham's maiden speech into Parliament. Now, Mark Latham has sent feminists into a tiz. He is the New South Wales Senator for One Nation. And I'm going to read this speech to you. So, particularly if you're not playing this back live, I suggest you go get a drink, a coffee, a beer, a tea, whatever it is that you enjoy drinking while you soak in some glorious, glorious content and get stuck in. All right. And by the way, before I actually get into that, if any of you are on social media, I'm not a big fan of it, but Facebook, go to Pauline Hanson's Please Explain webpage. Go and look at the most recent post. She actually has a post about family law and about people falsely using litigations to gain advantage in custody battles, because I know that's a big thing. It's not mentioned in this speech, but it is definitely a party policy and something they are strongly focusing on fixing, because at the moment it's overly expensive in the family courts and people are weaponizing current legislation, and One Nation does know that that needs to be changed. Anyway, let me get into this. So I'm going to read this speech word for word for you guys. I'm not going to interject. I'm not going to give any commentary mid-speech. I want you to hear this speech from the first word to the last, because this is hands down probably one of the best speeches I have ever heard in my entire life, period. Mr. President, not far from where you sit, some 10 meters from the entrance to this old chamber, there's a wonderfully imposing canvas. It depicts the decisive moment in Australian history, the landing of the first fleet at Sydney Cove on 26th of January, 1788. The painting by Algernon Talmage is called The Founding of Australia, a founding marked by the arrival of Western civilization on this continent. It's an appropriate entrance statement for this place, the mother of legislative power and progress in Australia, despite attempts by both sides of politics to either abolish it or silence it. The Legislative Council has, by and large, been a civilizing force in New South Wales. Over the years, the ALP, Australian Labor Party, has expelled more of its members of Legislative Council for failing to vote for the Council's abolition than there are here representing Labor today. Among Conservatives, George Reid in 1895 dissolved the Parliament on the single issue of Legislative Council obstruction, pledging, he said, to clear the fossils from a rotten and corrupt chamber. And he hadn't even met Eddie Obeid. Crooks and scoundrels aside, this place has been true to Talmage's painting. It has honored the founding principles of our nation, that progress is possible through parliamentary debate and deliberation, that in a land of hard work and meritocracy, every citizen can and should receive a fair go. For all its pitfalls and failings, the Legislative Council has always redeemed itself in wanting to extend the reach of Western civilization and advancement in Australia. Until now. Like so many parts of our politics that have changed quickly in recent times, there are voices here who do not believe in the virtues of the West, who do not acknowledge the nation-building achievements of our culture and our country. It's like a scene from the life of Brian, a case of, what has Western civilization done for us? only advanced healthcare and education, architecture, engineering, information technology, free speech, and, the rule of law. I added the bit. Sorry, I know I said to stick to the script. In fact, this chamber, this parliament, in this city, all our public institutions and the material comforts we take for granted, none of them could exist without the greatness of the West. Without the advances that began with the Enlightenment and Industrial Revolution and continue to this day. Yet still, among the leftist elites, among the social engineers and cultural dietitians, sneering at our civilization and its achievements has become their new pastime. They preach diversity, but practice a suffocating cultural conformity, wanting everyone to be just like them. They argue for inclusion, but as soon as a Christian, a conservative, a libertarian, a nationalist, a working class larrikin, an outsider from the vast suburbs and regions of our nation disagrees with them, they crank up the PC outrage machine to exclude them from society. They are tolerant of everything except dissenting values and opinions, meaning, of course, they are tolerant of nothing that matters, only themselves. This is the leftist curse through the ages, the recurring history of those who so badly crave control over others, they lose control over themselves. In their lust for authority, they lose their respect for the rights of others. Like a scene from Orwell's Animal Farm, the Green Labour left has become the thing it originally opposed. Elitist, would-be dictators taking away from working class communities the thing those battlers value. The right to speak their minds, to say they love their country and want Australia Day to stay. To practice their Christianity openly and freely. To send their children to school without the garbage of safe schools, wear it purple days, headrest indoctrination, and the other crackpot theories making some New South Wales classrooms more like a Hare Krishna meeting than actual education. And when they go to work, the chance to do their job without being bombarded by employment quotas, unconscious bias training, and a long list of unspeakable taboo words. Scary, scary stuff like guys and mums and dads. The new left are the new primitives of our time, junking the importance of evidence, of recorded history, of biological science, to pretend that all parts of our lives, especially race, gender, and sexuality, can be fluid. That everything we know and feel around us is in fact socially constructed. Mr. President, they are paddling fake news. We haven't been brainwashed by capitalist hegemony, as the postmodernists argue. People know and understand the things they see and feel in their lives. It's called evidence. Our personal characteristics and identities are fixed, not fluid. With few exceptions, people are either born male or female. We shouldn't be confusing young people and risking their mental health by pushing gender fluidity upon them. We shouldn't be taking away from parents their essential role as the primary carers of their children in matters personal and sexual. We shouldn't be changing the purpose of our education system, transforming schools from places of skill and academic attainment into gender fluidity factories. Most of all, we shouldn't be losing sight of the interests of mainstream majority Australians. In the last national census, for instance, 1,300 Australians identified as transgender, only 1,300 out of the whole entire population of Australia. But to listen to the political and media coverage of this issue, you would think there were 13 million. Mr. President, everywhere I travel, parents and grandparents, workers and communities tell me how concerned they are about Australia's direction. They ask me, what's happened to our country? Right? Where has this nonsense come from? The answer is clear. The leftist project then and now is about control. Having, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, lost the struggle for economic control, the left got smarter. It shifted from the Cold War to a culture war. It moved from pursuing economic Marxism to pushing cultural Marxism. Instead of trying to socialize the means of production, it's now trying to socialize the means of individual expression and belief, our language, our values, our behavior. Instead of seeking revolution at the top of government, it has marched through our institutions, a tactic that's harder to combat. And I'm going to comment here anyway. By institutions, we mean the education system, our government departments, our universities, our preschools, our primary schools, our high schools, everything. Everywhere we learn and find information, they're going through them. Our abiding national traditions of free speech. The elites have been remarkably successful in this cultural invasion. Our abiding national traditions of free speech, merit selection, resilience, and love of country are being lost, not just in the public sector, in schools, universities, public broadcasters, major political parties, and government agencies, but also in large parts of corporate Australia and the commercial media. The rest of us are the resistance to this national takeover. Our chief ally is evidence and human nature. Through the power of reason and enlightenment, people want to have a say about the things that are important to them. They want free speech. Australians are also a tough yet fair-minded people. It comes from our origins in colonial times, the things depicted in Talmage's painting. The Australian story in settling a harsh and sometimes hostile continent on the other side of the world is one of the most remarkable in human history. Leaders like Arthur Phillip and Lachlan Macquarie, in little more than a generation, turned a penal colony into a civilization, building what has now become the best nation on earth. It was achieved through resilience and mateship, the Australian habit of toughing it out and treating others as equals. Jack is as good as his master. It's in our nature to treat people as we find them, to judge them on their individual merit, their work ethic, their community contribution. This is what makes identity politics, subdividing our people on the basis of race, gender, and sexuality, so foreign to the Australian way. Just as the old Soviet Union fell over because human nature wanted economic competition and individual wealth and excellence, I believe these new mutant strains, right? These new mutant strains of social control, postmodernism, and identity politics will also fail. They run contrary to the nature and evidence of our lives. Mr. President, I ran for Parliament to be part of the fight back for freedom and fairness. New South Wales One Nation took 34 detailed policies to the election, including a detailed package for human rights reform. We believe New South Wales needs new laws protecting freedom of speech, especially on university campuses where so much of academic and student freedom has been lost. Sometimes we laugh at the absurdity of political correctness, but at its core, it's an insidious movement, a handbrake on liberty. If you control someone's language, you control a big part of their lives, how they interact with others, how they communicate in society, their feeling of belonging. Like every other Australian, I own my own words. I know what I mean by them. Like so many Australians, I refuse to allow my words to be controlled by strangers, by the elites with their confected outrage and PC censorship. In truth, in society, offense is taken, not given. It's a personal choice based on assumptions about what someone meant by their words. Yet the only person speaking those words truly knows what was meant. As the great John Cleese has pointed out, telling a joke about someone doesn't mean we hate them. We love the people we joke about, the Irish, the blondes, the gays, everyone, as they've helped to bring humor and joy into our lives. The other problem with political correctness is in knowing what's genuine and what's not. So much of the offenderati, the outrage industry, involves the fabrication of offense, saying that their feelings have been hurt solely for the reason of closing down their political opponents. PC is riddled with these internal contradictions. Let me give you an example from this parliament. Labour MPs are not allowed to say two words, white flight. Even though they are a truthful expression of what's happening in Western Sydney. Having been identified by Luke Foley, it's a sad day for democracy when MPs can't talk about the evidence in their electorates. Then last year in the Blue Mountains, when Michael Daly launched a wrong-headed attack on Asians with PhDs, the two Labour MPs in the room stood mute. So the Labour leader who had it right, his words can't be repeated, while the one who had it wrong went unchecked for months on end. Go figure. New South Wales needs freedom of speech laws, even for its own MPs, and also new laws for the protection of religious freedom. Mr. President, as I'm sure you can appreciate, many migrants came to Australia to escape religious persecution. Now they are saying the problems in their home country have followed them here. I'm not a Christian, but I recognize the vital contribution of Christianity to our civilization. Its vast social and charitable work, its teaching of right and wrong in civil society. Mr. President, I stand with Israel Folau. In his own private time away from his job playing football, he's a preacher at his community church, and naturally he quotes the Bible. He believes, as millions of people have believed for thousands of years, that sinners go to hell. As per his valid religious faith, he loves the sinner but condemns the sin. Yet for his beliefs, his Christianity, he is not allowed to play rugby, to chase the pigskin around the park. How did our state and our nation ever come to this? I was on Folau's list of sinners, more than once actually. But as I don't believe in hell, there was no way I could take offense. Those claiming outrage have fabricated their position solely for the purpose of censorship. This is not an argument about diversity. The Wallabies have no female players, no disabled, no elderly, no middle-aged. They are selected from a tiny fraction of the young, fit, athletic male population. By excluding a committed Christian, they are making their game less inclusive. And as for Folau being a role model for young gay men, one only needs to state this proposition to understand its absurdity. Footballers are not role models for anyone other than in enjoying their sporting ability. I say to any young person, if you're looking for guidance and looking for inspiration in life, study Churchill, Lincoln, Reagan, and Roosevelt, not Todd Carney. By the way, that's Ronald Reagan, not Reg Reagan. Mr. President, I believe that no Australian should live in fear of the words they utter. No Australian should be fearful of proclaiming four of the most glorious words of our civilization. I am a Christian. No one should be sacked by their employer for statements of genuine belief and faith that have got nothing to do with their job. The Folau case exposes the new serfdom in the Australian workplace. How big companies, the corporate PC elites, are wanting to control all aspects of their employees' lives. Their religious and political views, how they speak and think, how they behave, even in their own time away from the workplace. This is a stunning intrusion on workers' rights. Yet far from condemning the new serfdom, Labour and the trade unions have been cheering it on. As per our One Nation election commitments, I will be moving legislation for protection of free speech, religious freedom, and the privacy rights of workers. Mr. President, the fight back for freedom is long overdue, as is the fight back for fairness. I mentioned earlier that for most people, identities of race, gender, and sexuality are fixed. People are born a certain way and shouldn't be judged by the things in life they can't change. To do so is to practice the poison of identity politics. It's become the great obsession of leftists everywhere, even though for normal people, it's not the way in which they live their lives. No one wakes up in the morning and thinks, I'm male or female, I'm black or white, I'm straight or gay. They start their day as workers, as parents, as family members, as community contributors. Not only is identity politics irrelevant to most people, it's a betrayal of social justice and social democracy. And by social justice, he means actual fairness and social justice, not SJW social justice. In the 80s and 90s, we were told to look through a person's race, gender, and sexuality. Things like skin color were irrelevant to a person's true character, to their work ethic, to the way in which they care about others, to the individuality of their existence. There was no need to lump them into broad, unrepresentative categories based on the primitive notion of how they look. When I was first elected to federal parliament in 1994, if you had asked me who typically is the neediest person in your electorate, the one you are trying to help as a Labour MP, I would have said a white working class man living in one of Campbelltown's public housing estates who had been restructured out of manufacturing work in the 80s and now faces the indignity of long-term unemployment and welfare dependency. How silly of me. How little did I know. Now I'm told he was an example of white male privilege, that the bum out of his pants was actually a rainbow shot up his backside. Mr. President, international studies have shown that Australia is one of the most racially tolerant and fairest nations on earth. Through equal pay and employment opportunity laws, we have achieved large slabs of gender equality. Australia now has more female than male university graduates, lawyers, GP doctors, vets, teachers, office managers, and public servants. When the Prime Minister's department tested for evidence of unconscious bias in its 2017 beta study of workforce recruitment practices, it found that the only type of bias was against white men. Women, ethnic groups, and Aborigines enjoyed favoritism in the workplace. This is the truth about Australia and the fair-mindedness of our people. Mr. President, identity politics is a zero-sum game. It uses employment quotas and other forms of institutionalized bias to favor one hand-picked identity group over another, regardless of personal need. This causes enormous resentment among those who miss out because they have the wrong skin color, the wrong gender, the wrong sexuality, things they can do nothing about. Divisive identity politics subdivides our society, destroying its sense of common good. And it leaves the rainbow left impotent. They have no solution for the white welfare-dependent man in a public housing estate. In fact, far from helping him, perversely and tragically, they define him as part of the problem. Imagine how he feels when he sees other identity categories gaining special treatment. Mr. President, I have studied these things all my adult life, and I come to this chamber convinced there is only one way of running a fair society, and that's through merit. The best person for the job must get the job regardless of race, gender, and sexuality. This is why One Nation proposes to abolish employment quotas and other identity-based forms of discrimination. Let me say something about identity politics at the other end of the political spectrum. When Pauline Hanson approached me to run for One Nation, I insisted on all discriminatory clauses and policies being purged from the party's platform. When this happened, we were able to campaign as a pro-merit, anti-discrimination party in the New South Wales election. I was particularly pleased that the party ran its first Islamic candidate, Emma Eros, in the seat of Hornsby. In the social media storm that followed, some anti-Islamic fundamentalists told me that they couldn't vote for us as long as a Muslim was representing One Nation. Privately, I thought, so be it. I oppose discrimination in all of its forms, whether it's the new anti-white racism of the left or the flawed belief of some that all Muslims are evil, inspired by the Quran to cut our throats when the caliphate is called. Islam, like all religions, is diverse in its range and intensity of belief. It gains more public attention because at one extreme, when it's bad, it's barbaric, with the horror of radical Islamic terrorism. At the other extreme, it's got some great people, such as the Fijian Indian community in southwest Sydney, kicked out of India for being Muslim, and then kicked out of Fiji for working too hard. They've come to Australia and set up businesses with a strong work ethic and study ethic. I know several of these families and I'm proud to call them friends, as I am for Emma Eros. As a party, One Nation can't go around calling on migrants to integrate, yet not support someone like Emma who has. A licensed plumber and businesswoman. She talks Western, dresses Western, and works hard Western style, yet also practices a moderate conservative strain of Islam. She's a wonderful example of what multiculturalism should be, a seamless blend of the best of our country and her traditional beliefs. Whether we're talking about the extreme left or extreme right of politics, the challenge, a work in perpetuity, is to overcome ignorance, for people to cross racial and religious boundaries and get to know each other, building a more trusting and cohesive society. Mr. President, the rise of identity politics has coincided with Australia losing control of the scale of its immigration program. Governments seem to think we owe the rest of the world easy entry into our country, when in fact immigration policy should be framed for the benefit of the people who live here now. Big Australia immigration has flooded the labour market, holding down wages. It has also flooded the housing market, driving up demand and prices. It's fueling Sydney's congestion and overdevelopment crisis. The city cannot continue to grow at 100,000 per annum at a severe cost to the environment and residential lifestyle. Whether someone is a long-standing resident or they recently came to Australia and Sydney, we are all in the same circumstance, crawling along car park roads, standing on crowded trains, trying to combat congestion and urban sprawl. For a government struggling to build a couple of tram tracks down the main street, the promise of better planning is a hoax. We know this problem well in Western Sydney. For 40 years, I've been arguing that jobs and services need to come to our region before the people do. It's the reason I got into politics in the first place. If anything, in this era of high immigration, the problem is getting worse. None of the lessons of the 70s and 80s have been learned. Look at the proposed aerotropolis surrounding the Badgerys Creek airport site. The government talks about it like it's a cross between Silicon Valley and, I'm going to quote Rain Man here, Disneyland. Or to those of us who haven't seen Rain Man, Disneyland. But it's looming as just another excuse for urban sprawl and underservicing. The government says it's building a new city the size of Adelaide with 1.3 million people. Yet remarkably, there are no plans for a new public hospital, only a so-called integrated health facility, servicing less than 20% of the proposed population. Adelaide has 4 public hospitals. The Aerotropolis, none. I say to the government, fix this problem. It's a huge priority for One Nation. You're creating the youth capital of Australia between Penrith and Camden. It needs not only a new public hospital, but also a specialist children's hospital to cope with rapid population growth. Mr. President, earlier I asked where the attacks on our country and our civilization are coming from. Here's the problem. I'm not just talking about the usual suspects from the Green Labour left. I'm talking about Liberal and National parties that have been paralysed on these issues, that haven't stood up for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and meritocracy. Specifically in this place, I'm talking about a coalition government that tried to abolish greyhound racing in New South Wales, surrendering to a belief that animal rights are more important than human rights. I'm talking about a national party that under Minister Adrian Piccoli allowed the monstrosity of postmodernism, of fluidity theory, to run through the New South Wales school curriculum. The Nationals used to believe in the basics of school education. Sure, they're still committed to young people learning the alphabet, but it's the LGBTQI version. The rot set in under Piccoli, who amazingly became a mouthpiece for the Teachers Federation. He broke the golden rule of sound education policy in this state. When the Teachers Federation says something needs to be done, do the opposite. Through a loss of academic standards, testing and grading, New South Wales school results are going backwards compared to other states and other countries. There's no one thing that's gone wrong in the education system. What we are experiencing is system failure, multiple problems feeding off each other, a downward spiral in standards and outcomes. Teacher quality has collapsed in many government schools, to the point where it now resembles social work more than academic instruction. The curriculum has been infested with ideological content, with high school English becoming a tutorial in identity politics. Student resilience is being lost, replaced by snowflake schooling, where only half an excuse is needed to avoid testing and grading. Unlike fads like growth mindset, soft skills and progression points are also clogging up the classroom. The all must have prizes mentality is leveling out notions like excellence and, effort. Like the old Soviet Union, no matter how students perform, they all get the same results and recognition. In disadvantaged communities, a welfare school model has emerged. Yes, it has. Welfare school model has emerged, whereby teachers pursue pastoral care and student happiness as their primary goals rather than results and career paths. I must say, Mr. President, these developments break my heart. One of the best parts of my life was attending Hurlston at Glenfield, by far the best school in southwest Sydney, until Pickley ripped it off us with his harebrained scheme for moving it to Richmond. The tragedy of declining school results is that they hit disadvantaged students hardest. I can tell you, a good school is a poor kid's passport to a better life. There's a mountain of work to be done in restoring these opportunities and uplifting the standards of New South Wales education. It's all there in the One Nation policy platform. Measurement is the key. The old adage in public sector management applies. What gets measured gets done. And in New South Wales schools, we measure very little. The repair job in education is massive. Hours of discussion. Hundreds of questions to be asked and answered. Scores of policy ideas and reform proposals to be advanced. And that's what I'll be doing throughout this term of Parliament. My word, I will. Mr. President, I'm concerned for the future prosperity of our state. There are two clear and present dangers to the New South Wales economy. I've mentioned one in education, the other is energy policy. This involves a basic question of responsibility. This government and this parliament has no greater duty to the people of New South Wales than to keep the lights on, so our essential services can continue to save lives, our households can continue to function, and our businesses can continue to grow. History shows and common sense confirms that the best way of doing this is through reliable, dispatchable baseload power. To build the system on a strong foundation of full-time 24/7 power generation, on top of which intermittent part-time sources can then play a role. When the peak demand hits invariably in summer, and accidents hit the system again in summer, around-the-clock baseload power is our best insurance policy against blackouts. The two ways of achieving this are through nuclear power and coal-fired stations. Yet across the country, nuclear power is banned, while coal is being run out of the market through the subsidies, targets and special deals being offered to renewable energy. The Australian Energy Market Operator has said that in the decade to 2025, the equivalent of 30% of New South Wales peak electricity demand is being lost in power generation. It's being replaced by a patchwork series, a series of part-time power sources, the effectiveness of which rely heavily on weather and environmental conditions. When the sun's not shining, there's no wind power. When the water supply runs short, there's no hydro. Even gas power is limited due to access and pricing issues in New South Wales, meaning it's best suited to peaking plants rather than 24/7 baseload power. Those are part-time sources of power. Yes, it may be possible to cobble them together in a way that meets full-time electricity demand, but the risks are high. We are talking about a privatized, vertically integrated market where normal pricing signals don't apply. There are perverse incentives to short the market, as we've seen with AGL. In terms of green technology, there's another leap of faith: reliance on the rapid development of battery storage. Good luck with that. For all the PR hoopla about Elon Musk's battery farm in South Australia, it has a capacity for meeting the needs of the Tomago aluminium smelter in the Hunter Valley for just 8 minutes. In truth, the projections for energy production and peak energy consumption in New South Wales are beginning to separate in the wrong direction. The state is losing its energy self-sufficiency. The likely tipping point, a heightened risk of blackouts, will occur in the summer of 2022 2023, following the closure of Liddell. As a parliament, our responsibility, our duty of care to the people of New South Wales is to make provision right now for this contingency. We have to stop sleepwalking into disaster. Mr. President, I'm not a climate denier. I respect all forms of science, but just as much, I don't believe in running public policy through the work of zealots. And that's what renewables have become, a new pagan religion, whereby the Green Left wants to hand over human control of our energy grid to the vagaries of weather through wind and sun worship. We are being asked to change the climate by relying on the weather, a high-risk, paradoxical way of planning for the needs of a modern economy. There is a place for renewables in the system, but it must be supplementary to baseload power, not the other way around. Currently, the Federal Labor Shadow Minister for Energy, Mark Butler, is promising the Australian people a new era of dispatchable renewable energy. Yet when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining, there is nothing to dispatch. Butler will end up being the Minister for Blackouts. Mr. President, our Asian economic competitors must be laughing their heads off. Australia is the world's most resource-rich nation, yet we have some of the world's highest electricity prices, and we're shedding generation capacity that would otherwise meet 30% of public demand during the hot summers of the nation's largest state. New South Wales should be a global energy superpower with abundant nuclear, coal-fired gas and renewable energy. How can this goal be achieved? I have confidence in the new Energy Minister, Matt Keane. Under his policy leadership, it would be wise for the government to pivot away from a renewables fetish and emphasize the importance of energy security and affordability. One Nation offers its cooperation with implementing 6 vital changes. 1. Upgrading the capacity of our interstate connectors, especially into Coleridge, Queensland. 2. Bundling up the state government's electricity consumption and putting out to tender a supply contract exclusively for additional coal-fired power. 3. Abolishing all target subsidies and special deals for renewables, levelling the playing field on the production side of the market. 4. Abolishing the government's climate change fund, which has become a slush fund for projects unrelated to climate change. This would cut electricity prices for households and businesses. 5. Immediate approval of the Santos project at Narrabri to overcome the state's chronic deficiency in gas supply. This is no longer an environmental or land use issue, but a question of keeping the lights on. In a longer-term planning for the state, lifting the ban on uranium mining and nuclear power as per the Deputy Premier's policy. I can advise the House that yesterday I gave notice of a private member's bill for this purpose. Mr. President, I've had a fortunate life. As a child, my parents told me to study hard at school, and I did. As a young man, I had the honour of being Labour Mayor of my hometown, Liverpool, building facilities that should have been built 30 years earlier. Then I had the opportunity to serve in the House of Representatives, doing what very few Australians ever have a chance to do, running to run the country at a general election. For the past 14 years, I've had the greatest joy and responsibility of my life as a home dad, as a primary carer, giving support and all my love to my wife Janine and our 3 children, Oliver, Isaac and Sienna. When I left the federal parliament in 2005, the words of the former member for Bass, Warwick Smith, echoed in my ears. Every day you spend away from your children is a day you never get back. The days and years with my children have been the best of my life, but now they are so much older, and through them having seen what the government school system has become, it was time to come here to do something about it. On 23rd of March, amongst the minor parties on our side of politics, 3 members of the Legislative Council were elected, 2 from One Nation. I congratulate my friend and my colleague, Rod Roberts, on his election, and thank those who made it possible. Our party leader, Senator Pauline Hanson, a committed patriot who would do anything for her country. Our highly dedicated New South Wales One Nation officials, Mick Jackson and Amit Batish. All our candidates, party workers and volunteers. I especially thank my campaign manager, Corinne Barraclough, who was magnificent in every respect. I also thank Alan Jones, who at various times gave me a chance when no one else would. No one in Australian public life does more research or is more thoroughly across his brief than Alan, making him not only a great broadcaster but a great fighter for Australia. Most of all, I thank the people of New South Wales who have given me a second go at parliamentary service. To top the personal vote below the line at the election confirms a special responsibility. Our supporters are a long way from the centre of political power, but they hold a powerful belief in what politics should be. They are a salt of the earth people without a parliamentary or media megaphone of their own. So they rely on parties like Pauline Hanson's One Nation to fight for the things they love about their country. Mr. President, for those of us who believe in the virtues of Western civilization, who treasure the advances and values of the Enlightenment, who look at Talmage's painting and marvel at its meaning, this is the fight of our lives. Our ethos, sir, is simple. No surrender. No surrender in any debate, in any institution, on any front. No surrender in trying to take back our country. That, Mr. President, is why I'm here and what I'm fighting for. What a freaking speech. Seriously, what a speech. Now, guys, I know that, like, as I said at the start, for those of you who missed it, I know it didn't speak about family law, but go to Pauline Hanson's Please Explain page on Facebook, scroll through, you'll find the post that she actually put up about family law and about all the problems. In fact, you know what? I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to share with you guys what has actually been publicly shared. So this is actually a clearly articulated, absolute public policy that they have. Let me just bring this up. I'll have to hotspot off this bad boy. This is just a dummy phone with no data. And I also wanted to thank my faithful mod, Godbother01, brother. I really appreciate all the help you do in making sure all the comments get approved and all sorted out. And Godbother also did raise a good point. Look, Latham is not pro-gun. So for those of you who are pro-gun, particularly people who are, you know, shooters, either recreational or farmers, who don't want to see their guns taken off them, by all means, there's the shooters and fishers parties. So for those of you in Australia who weren't aware of that party and who do own guns and I guess don't want to have any further tightening on restrictions around guns, because they are quite tight at the moment as it is, then feel free to vote for that party. But I mean, just based on this speech alone, I think when we're talking about the greater good and the issues that affect I would say the majority of people, this just covers so much of it. I really think so. So Godbother says shooters party are lazy. Who would you suggest that the farmers and recreational shooters vote for, Godbother? Because I know Godbother is right into politics and he is all across all of these particular issues. So do value your input on that, Godbother. Also, I just wanted to say a quick thank you before I continue to the two gentlemen that donated during the stream. Name withheld with $5. Says politics is a false sense of structure where corruption and people are controlled by plutocracy. Yes, in the majority of cases, unfortunately, that has proven to be the case over and over. And John Murray with £3 says, keep spreading the word, Sid. John Murray, thank you. I will continue to do that. So let me get back to this. I'm going to share this post with you because this is really important. Family law, it's just there. When you see this in the page, you'll be able to have a read on that. It says, family law needs a royal commission. Did you know 3 men suicide each day and 1 woman is murdered every week due to family law matters? More than 21,000 family law cases are currently backlogged and clogging our court system. Courts are taking up to 4 years to hand down family law decisions. Children are being used as pawns in parents' psychological attacks on each other. Legal fees are out of the average person's reach. Grandparents are prevented from seeing their grandchildren. Child support is not working and needs a major overhaul. And if you do want to see Pauline Hanson's speech in Parliament talking about family law and how fathers were treated unfairly and how it was biased against them, search Pauline Hanson family law on YouTube and it's about maybe 2-3 months ago from the date of this video. It'll be the only one there around about that time frame, so feel free to go check that out, and I'm sure you'll be pleasantly surprised with what you see. I know there has been promises previously made, but unfortunately until recently One Nation hasn't had as much influence in the upper house to pass such laws, so that's why they haven't been able to, I guess, get such things through, because you don't just get to automatically change laws because you get into politics. You need to go through a process, and unfortunately there has been other parties at play, i.e. the major parties, Australian Labor Party and the Greens, which are the two most cancerous political parties in Australia, in my personal view. Just complete identity politics, just really nasty. Oh, we're so virtuous, like the biggest virtue signal I've ever seen, personally. Up to you what you guys vote for. I'm not telling you what you shouldn't, but I mean, I'm just giving you One Nation speech. I'm telling you about things. God Botherer just says Fraser Anning is better for gun owners and men. Also, so are Liberal Democrats. Australian Conservatives are good too. I agree, those are all good options, and I think that they should be very high on the list of your below the line voting. You should be voting below the line if you really want to have your say. Vote Greens has got to be dead last. I mean, they're just, like Sarah Hanson-Young said, it is not, and I quote, "It is not women's fault that men cannot control themselves and behave like morons and pigs." So they should go last, I'm just saying. And then the Labor Party, who is basically in bed with the Greens, should go second last. And then I think the Liberal Party needs a big smack across the head. They need to go third last, in my opinion. But yeah, so the Fraser Anning, Liberal Democrats, Australian Conservatives, Pauline Hanson's One Nation, and Australian Better Families as well. Check out all of their policies, guys. See which ones you'd prefer to put in what order, and then put them up towards the top of your list. If you really care about what's going on for us men and the way that we're being treated, if you do care about conservative values, even if you're a lady. So, and God Botherer has put out a video about how to vote in the Federal Senate. Thank you for that, God Botherer. So if you tap on his name, you should be able to go to his channel. I don't know if I can as the streamer, but check it out. Anyway, guys, I would love to hear what you think of the speech that Mark Latham put out. I have put a link to the transcript below if this video is a bit too long for you to listen to in its entirety, and feel free to comment that in the comments so other people can see that and check it out. And make your voice counted, men. If you know other men who are just really narrow and they're just like, oh, I can only vote for Labor or Liberal if they live in Australia, let them know about this video. Share this video with them. Make sure you smash the thumbs up so this does trend, because other people are searching for it, and I'd love them to actually see this video, even if for no other reason than to open their eyes to what else is going on. Anyway, guys, share the video, smash the thumbs up, make sure you comment, and if you do want to donate, and thanks to the guys who did donate on the previous video, paypal.me/SydneyMGTOW, patreon.com/SydneyMGTOW. And I'm gonna go downstairs to my house that has really shitty internet reception, which is why I don't stream from there right now. And I'm gonna go and do a few things that I need to do. But until next time, guys, I appreciate you all.